Joining us now to talk about this is Twila Hansen, Chief People Officer at LinkedIn. Twila, tell us, how much did this policy come into fruition? What made you guys decide this?
Yeah, thanks. Happy to share. We really take a look at our culture at LinkedIn, and we've always been a culture rooted in trust, accountability, and compassion. So as we were thinking about what makes sense for our approach, our return to office, we really wanted to make sure that we were anchoring on trust. So our approach is simple, but we believe it's powerful. We trust our employees to do their best work wherever that best work means, whatever that means for them and for their teams. So that means that we're not taking a one-size-fits-all approach. We won't be asking our employees to come into the office for a minimum amount of time. All of our employees will either be hybrid or remote. And we'll continue to, be in dialogue, learn, listen, and figure this out as we go. But we do truly believe that taking the approach rooted in trust and treating people like adults is really aligned with LinkedIn's culture.
Now, something you mentioned, other companies like Apple, for example, have more rigid return to office approach and expect employees to come into work at least 3 days a week with few exceptions. Do you think that this policy makes places like LinkedIn stand out, and was that part of the goal?
Our goal is really to listen to our employees and understand what we needed to do to meet them where they are. There's been a lot of change that our employees have had to go through, like many other companies, over the past year and a half. And we wanted to really listen and understand how our employees were feeling. Are they just exhausted by the change? What did they need in order to do their best work? So for us, that was really important. We wanted to make sure that we were taking an employee-centered approach, and that, if everyone is able to identify where they do their best work, that's what's best for our employees, and that's what's best for our organization.
Now, LinkedIn also recently gave the entire company a paid week off to prevent burnout. What could you tell us about the impact on employee morale and mental health from that decision?
Yeah, so we created an initiative called Lift Up to specifically archive, curate resources such as mental health resources, workshops for managers, how to prioritize during stressful times, how to identify burnout. And we also had surprise and delight moments, such as announcing no meeting days, as well as announcing this Rest Up week, which was a surprise shutdown week in April.
Wow.
We heard from our employees that the pandemic was hard on them, to unplug, to find the opportunity to connect with their families, do things that were fun. They just found that they were working intensely during the time and not taking time to address potential burnout or self-care. So we thought, as we were trying to figure out how do we show our appreciation and gratitude for our employees, what can we do? What can we give them that they would truly value? And again, through listening to our employees, we figured out that just the gift of time was really important. So by shutting down all of our offices across the globe, not only were we giving our employees time, but it was true time. It was true time that they didn't have to check their email. They didn't feel like that, there was any FOMO, that they were missing out on meetings. And when our employees came back, they were refreshed. They had the opportunity to volunteer, take care of themselves, do nothing. And they really did appreciate the fact that we gave them something that they truly valued. And they came back really highly engaged and felt that they were seen and heard.
Now, do you think these flexible policies and mental health initiatives will continue after the pandemic?
I think, like before the pandemic, stress is inevitable. If it's not managed, it can lead to burnout. So I think employee wellness programs were important prior to the pandemic. They are critical during the pandemic. And as leaders, we need to make sure that we're understanding how our employees are feeling once we get out of this pandemic, and make sure that employees ultimately feel cared for. At LinkedIn, our employees are our strength. And we always have prioritized employee health and employee happiness. And, I see us continuing to do that after the pandemic.
Now, speaking of stress, many people have quit work altogether, creating a resignation boom across the country. Is this a trend you've seen at LinkedIn? And if so, how are you working to retain employees and keep them happy, like it sounds like you're doing now?
We're calling it the Great Reshuffle. I think, the interesting stat in the United States in April, we saw 4 million employees quit their jobs, which was the biggest spike that has ever been recorded. We're also seeing the Great Reshuffle globally. In a Microsoft sponsored survey of 31,000 global workers, 41% of these employees indicated that they plan to leave their current employer sometime this year. So it's happening. I think it's really important to be proactive. And yes, it's happening, but that doesn't mean as an employer, you need to let it happen. And I think getting really clear on flexibility, helping managers manage remotely, making sure that managers understand how to have a hybrid meeting so that there's equity and everybody is participating, as well as just doubling down on career advancement, making sure that employees are really clear about what those advancement opportunities, what exists within your organization, so you don't feel compelled to look outside your organization. I think those are all the things that we believe are really important to retain your talent and make sure that you have, a healthy work culture.
Now, finally, COVID cases have increased since LinkedIn made this announcement. So how do you expect the Delta variant to impact LinkedIn's return to work plans?
Yeah, I think with our hybrid approach, it really has worked. The fact that we have this hybrid approach, I think it's really opportune for us, because if we're in a city and in a location and there's a surge, our employees can choose to be remote employees. We are really leading with safety first. We're not asking any of our employees to come into any office if the local environment has any surges and it's not safe for employees to come in. So, and as we get to a safer place, that's when our employees could, opt into either working in a hybrid fashion or a remote fashion. But as of now, we're really asking all of our employees to be safe, work remotely, and let's make sure that we're taking care of one another, and hopefully we'll get on the other side of this pandemic.
What is the best piece of advice you can give to perhaps a management team who is watching this, or a manager who is watching this, that you guys learned from what you did that you want others to learn?
Yeah. Best piece of advice, there is not a one-size-fits-all approach. When you talk to employees, when you speak to employee resource groups about their hopes and fears around what work will look like after the pandemic, you learn a lot. So I think just getting really clear on how your employees feel and designing an approach that works for your culture and your values, it's critical during this time.
Twila Hansen, Chief People Officer at LinkedIn. Thank you so much for being on our show this morning. I appreciate your time.